If you want to switch from the back,
very good afternoon very good morning to those in the UK, and a very good afternoon to our friends in Southeast Asia, and a warm welcome to the Future for Cancer Services Innovation Forum with ASEAN partners. This event is hosted by Healthcare UK, the Department for Business and Trade, and the UK-ASEAN Business Council. My name is Alan Lai with the UK-ASEAN Business Council based in Brunei, and I'm delighted to be your MC for today's event. This is a hybrid event with guests in London at the Royal Society of Medicine and with over 200 guests online across both the UK and Southeast Asia. And now let us begin to deliver the opening remarks. Would you please give a very warm welcome to Ian Gibbons, the CEO of the UK-ASEAN Business Council. Ian, over to you in London.
Thank you, Alan. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm delighted that UK-ABC and Healthcare UK have been able to come together to put together this morning's event. We're very grateful for the opportunity to work with such an esteemed partner and discuss one of the most important and pressing issues across the healthcare sector. So according to The Lancet, in 2020, there were over 1 million new cases of cancer and nearly 700,000 cancer deaths in the ASEAN region. The most commonly diagnosed cancers were cancers of the breast, lung, colon, and rectum, while the most common causes of cancer death were cancers of the lung, liver, and breast. Now, with an aging population and changes in lifestyle and environments, exposures, cancer is expected to play an increasing role in the health of the region. Cancer is the leading cause of disability-adjusted life years in Brunei, Thailand, and Singapore, and is second only to cardiovascular diseases in Cambodia, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Myanmar. Cancer is a disease that affects millions of people around the world, and the impact it has on individuals and their families cannot be overstated. But while the challenges we face are significant, so too are the opportunities to develop new and innovative solutions that can help us to better prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. Today, we are fortunate to have an outstanding group of speakers and participants from both the UK and ASEAN who will be sharing their insights, experiences, and expertise on this critical topic. Together, we will explore the latest trends and advancements in cancer research, diagnosis, and treatment, and discuss how we can work together to improve outcomes for patients and families around the world. Our keynote speakers will be sharing their knowledge on a range of topics, including emerging therapies, cancer screening and prevention, and the latest innovations in cancer care. We will also have a panel discussion where we will explore the challenges and opportunities of implementing new cancer care solutions and how we can overcome barriers to progress. I'm delighted we have representation from the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, from our UK-ABC partner, AstraZeneca, and from an excellent range of UK experts in the programme. Now, to get us underway, it's my absolute pleasure to call on His Majesty's Ambassador to ASEAN, Her Excellency Sarah Tiffin, to deliver her welcome remarks. Sarah has only just started in her role, and we are delighted to be able to host her so soon after becoming ambassador. Sarah, a very warm welcome to you, and now over to you in Jakarta. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Ian, and good morning to everybody in London. Good afternoon from here in Jakarta. I'd like to welcome delegates wherever you are to this important collaboration between the UK and our partners in ASEAN on the key issue of the future of cancer services. And I'd particularly like to thank the UK-ASEAN Business Council for working with Healthcare UK and the UK Department for Business and Trade on this event. Whether you're in the room at the Royal Society of Medicine in London or online from across the UK or Southeast Asia and beyond, as Ian was suggesting in his few words, the chances are that all of our lives have been touched in some way by cancer. So it's hard to think of a more important issue on which to work together. I was asked to speak about why the UK and Southeast Asia should collaborate. As Ian said, I'm new to the role of UK ambassador to ASEAN, and my entire mission is to seize the opportunity of the UK's new dialogue partnership with ASEAN in order to build that collaboration in the shape of a broad and deep and mutually beneficial partnership. Just a few months ago, we agreed the first 5-year UK-ASEAN plan of action, detailing all the areas where we want to work together, including on healthcare. So now more than ever, the UK and ASEAN have a basis for partnership on the social programmes and a reason to explore together the societal and also the commercial opportunities that healthcare innovation can offer. There were excellent reasons why the UK wanted to become a new dialogue partner for ASEAN and why we were so delighted to be accepted in 2021. We see this region of Southeast Asia as critical to our economy, to our security, and our interest in an open, stable, and prosperous international order. We've increased hugely our engagement with the region in recent years, and we're committed to stable, enduring partnership guided by respect for regional perspectives and which supports ASEAN centrality. Our plan of action sets out how we plan to cooperate with ASEAN over the next 5 years across the 3 pillars of the ASEAN community: political security and economic, but also, of course, socio-cultural. And part of our collaboration will take the form of ODA-funded programmes, including one that we're currently designing on health. But we'll bring so much more to bear in support of our partnership: technology transfer, sharing policy and technical and financial expertise, and supporting private sector investment and trade with the region. And on this last point, there are strong economic drivers for increased UK partnership in this region as well. The IMF forecasts that by 2027, the combined economies of ASEAN member states will be equivalent to the 4th largest economy in the world. They predict $5.2 trillion in GDP. This region will be seeking to ensure that key sectors, including healthcare, are both sustainable and at the cutting edge of innovation. And that's going to unlock even greater opportunities for ASEAN countries and for their economic partners. And the UK very much wants to be part of this exciting journey. To bring us back to the focus of today's event, the ASEAN UK Plan of Action contains specific pledges in the field of healthcare, which events like this one will help us to fulfil. Among other things, we've said that we'll promote collaboration in research and development on priority health issues, such as non-communicable diseases and sustainable healthcare. We've committed to strengthening science and technology engagement with ASEAN on health, and we've offered to establish commercial partnerships to share the expertise and experience of the NHS and of our wider healthcare industry. To take a specific example, the region's overall healthcare needs are rapidly evolving and expanding, and the need for collaboration is continuing to grow. And as an initial step in response to that, we identified the medtech sector as a first area of focus. We've already worked closely with the ASEAN Secretariat to strengthen ASEAN-UK ties in medtech. Our Growth Gateway programme, which is designed for UK medtech companies, helps British firms to explore market expansion opportunities in ASEAN countries. And we believe that through this collaboration and through knowledge sharing, we can unlock the full potential of the medtech industry in ASEAN, but also learn valuable lessons for the medtech industry in the UK, and together build a stronger, more resilient and more competitive global medtech industry for the benefit of all. There's huge scope to expand this approach to collaboration into other healthcare sectors. So as you can see, today's event covers issues that are at the core of the ASEAN-UK partnership. And I hope that your discussions will not only advance our shared understanding of innovation and of collaboration on clinical services such as cancer, but will also provide new ideas and open up new opportunities for you. And I wish you all a very successful event. And I'm happy to hand back to Alan Lai at the UK-ABC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Tiffin, for those opening remarks. ASEAN this year is chaired by Indonesia, and we're delighted to also have with us Shuhaela Fabya Haqim, healthcare sector champion of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, a key partner of the UK-ASEAN Business Council, and is also the country director for Indonesia of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Shuhaela, over to you in Jakarta.
Thank you, Alan. Morning, afternoon, delegates. Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Shuhaela. We can see you.
Oh, perfect, then. Perfect. So it has been a pleasure to be speaking in this great forum. I would like to share my excitement to potentially utilize this forum to enhance and utilize the potentially launch collaborations between UK and Southeast Asia countries. Let me start with my presentations. There are a couple of updated statistics and exciting data points for us to share with regards to ASEAN economy. Let me start with the good news. The good news is that to date, UK has been the top 3 largest investor in ASEAN, with your investment amounting up to £40 billion sterling to the region. So this is a great news, a great start. And then the next question is that, what about the next opportunities, right? ASEAN as a market, we're growing significantly for the last 20 years. We have over 4.8% real GDP growth. This is higher than we call it Russia, Brazil, US, and UK itself. So having said that, as the 4th largest economy with a 3.3 trillion GDP power, we consist of 10 countries with diversified and complementary economic structure. With that, I think the region presents significant opportunities in the healthcare space, given we have wide variations in the nature of the disease burden across the countries within the region. Let us talk about the broader conditions in ASEAN. Recently, our non-communicable diseases have been driving morbidity and mortality in the region. The disease burden of NCDs in ASEAN market are rising to the level of developed countries. We are looking at the indicator of the daily percent contribution in ASEAN countries, which are currently rising closer to that of developed countries, such as China and Japan. We see from the chart, 70 to 80% of daily are caused by non-communicable diseases in ASEAN. This means that NCD sectors such as oncology and cardiovascular industry are becoming increasingly significant in the Southeast Asia region. Now let's look at the broader healthcare landscape again. As a group consisting of 10 diverse countries, healthcare infrastructure in Southeast Asia varies significantly across our member countries. Quality in the areas outside the main metropolitan areas are generally worse. Hence, unlike more of the developed regions, Southeast Asia still faces significant gap to address these non-communicable diseases due to the lack of healthcare spending and infrastructure development. This can be seen from our average health financing per capita, which is currently stand at $470 compared to the OECD's health financing per capita of close to $3,000. We have that huge $2,500 per capita healthcare spending that hasn't been utilized to date. So it's important to take note that ASEAN's average currently skewed by the Singapore high healthcare financing per capita of $2,700 US, whereas the other member states' health financing per capita still range from $140 to $300. So there's a gap that we need to fill in by your investment. Next, let's zooming into the healthcare spending, where the healthcare spending comes from. Although we see that the spending in ASEAN is still dominated from the out-of-pocket private sector, the public sector is actually increasing its share of the healthcare spending to meet the region's current gap. This is apparent in the general trend of the decreasing private healthcare spending of total spend from 2012 to 2021, from 60 to 50% among the Southeast Asia member states. The key message here that I would like to highlight is that the increase in the public healthcare spending creates opportunities of improvements for the non-communicable disease care in the Southeast Asia region. Now, when we're talking about the ASEAN Business Advisory Council priorities for this year, which is led by Indonesia, we really want to focus on 3 priorities agenda. One, we're looking at the ASEAN TTD, R&D, and manufacturing. Second, this is where I think your support will then also be needed. We're looking at how we can create one ASEAN healthcare market, so that can help to de-risk your private investment in the market. And last but not least, we're trying to encourage more innovative and high-tech investment in ASEAN. To realize these priorities, we're looking at 3 initiatives by September this year. We'll launch the ASEAN Central Body for coordinating all of the regional R&D and manufacturing. We want to secure the commitment to expand more manufacturing of critical VDDs in ASEAN, and would like to also support the clinical trials more and more in ASEAN region. And a little bit of promotion here. We would like to invite you all to attend our ASEAN BAC Health Ministerial Forum and Private Sector Dialogue, which will be held next week on May 9th. If you're keen to participate, please share your interest to the committee. We'll help with your registrations. Last but not least, this is where we're talking about where the opportunities in the ASEAN market. The left-hand side, we see the market is there. Number-wise, $4 billion size market by 2027. The growing cancer incidence, 70% growth rate. The healthcare expenditure healthcare expenditure will reach $74 billion. And I think better regulatory framework is getting more and more reform in the region. In terms of where the opportunities are, right? Where the opportunities are. There are 3 areas that we see it's going to be more and more opportunities being present in the market. One is around the clinical trials. The second is on screening. And lastly is on the treatment side, the treatment itself. If you're aware, I think recently Indonesia, we have committed a deal with the US Mayo Clinic to develop one international hospital in Bali. Total investment was $600 million. And this will be one of the core services that will be provided is also oncology. So more and more, I think investment opportunities will be presented from the countries for the treatment of cancer itself. With that, for us in Southeast Asia, the conditions of our healthcare market is challenging, as seen as by the contributions of the NCD burden to the region. However, when we see challenges, we see opportunities. With that, we welcome your collaborations and please come to the region. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Shuhaela. Terima kasih. That was a fantastic overview of the situation in Southeast Asia, which tees us up nicely for the presentations and the case studies to follow. We've got 3 presentations from speakers in London, Malaysia, and Singapore. First up, it's my pleasure to invite David Fitzgerald, the Programme Director of NHS England Cancer Programme, to take the stage in London for his presentation. While David is coming to the stage, please do have your questions ready if you have any. We have a few short minutes of questions after each presentation if the presenters will keep to time. So with that, I will now hand over to David in London.
Goodness, that's me told. Can I just begin by thanking colleagues at ASEAN and the UK-ASEAN Business Council for the opportunity to come and join you today. My name's David Fitzgerald. I'm the Director of the NHS Cancer Programme at NHS England. I'm going to talk today about our work on early diagnosis in particular and talk a bit about how we are placing innovation at the heart of what we're doing. Cancer survival rates have been rising steadily in England. 1-year survival for patients diagnosed in 2020 was 74.6%, which, to give you some sense of how it's changed, is up 9 percentage points since 2005. 5-year survival for patients diagnosed in 2016 was 55.7%, which is up nearly 8 percentage points since 2005. In our long-term plan as an NHS, published in 2019, we pledged to match the best countries in Europe for all cancers in terms of 5-year survival. And for us, the key to unlocking that is diagnosing cancer earlier when it's more amenable to curative treatment. And so in that 2019 plan, we also set ourselves an ambition to diagnose 75% of cancers at stage 1 and 2 by 2028. That's quite a tough ask. To give you some sense of how tough an ask that is, early diagnosis rates in England have been stubbornly flat since about 2013 at 55%. So in effect, what we were trying to achieve was a 20 percentage point increase in early diagnosis in just shy of a decade. The NHS Cancer Programme, we've been putting in place what I think is the most ambitious and comprehensive strategy on early diagnosis anywhere in the world. I'm going to talk you through it very briefly. It's built around 6 key themes. The first is around supporting timely presentation. We're investing more than ever before in public awareness campaigns, which are in part focused sort of in a traditional way on raising awareness of symptoms of cancer. So we've got a cough campaign for lung cancer, but is also trying new things like a campaign aimed at taking the fear out of getting a cancer check. And these campaigns cumulatively have helped to ensure that since the pandemic, referrals by primary care doctors have been running at around 120% of the level that they were before the pandemic. The second strand of our strategy is around targeted interventions. We're doing more to identify and then place under surveillance people who are at increased risk of cancer due to genetic or lifestyle factors. This means improving the pathways for people with Lynch syndrome or the BRCA mutation, introducing new liver surveillance, and really importantly, and probably most significantly, our targeted lung health checks programme, which is taking trucks with CT scanners on them out into some of our most disadvantaged communities across the country where rates of mortality from lung cancer are highest. We've currently covered around a quarter of the population with our lung trucks. More than 300,000 people have taken up the offer of a check, and we've diagnosed nearly 1,800 cancers or people with lung cancer through these tests. Critically, 3/4 of the people diagnosed with lung cancer were caught at stages 1 and 2. And that compares with around 30% in the normal course of things. So it's absolutely transforming the diagnosis of lung cancer. Almost incredibly, I couldn't believe this data when I saw it a month or 2 ago, you are now more likely to get diagnosed early with lung cancer in England if you're from a disadvantaged community than if you're from the sort of top quintile by income. The third strand of our cancer strategy, our early diagnosis strategy, is about improving the very first steps in the pathway in primary care. We're giving GPs access to clinical decision support tools, digital tools, which help them identify people who require further investigation. We're also giving GPs the ability to request certain diagnostic tests directly. For the first time, we're also trialling a direct referral route from community pharmacy into secondary care. So you can go along to a chemist, and if you've got concerning symptoms, which are red flag symptoms, they can now, on a trial basis, refer you into the system. The fourth strand is around screening. We're modernising and expanding our cancer screening programmes, extending the starting age for bowel cancer screening down to 50, and I think testing self-sampling in the cervical screening programme, which I think has the potential to transform take-up, particularly amongst some communities amongst whom take-up for cervical screening has traditionally been low. The fifth strand is faster diagnosis. So we're streamlining pathways so to get people diagnosed more quickly once they're referred into the system. we are creating more diagnostic capacity and prioritising more of that diagnostic capacity for people with suspected cancer. And this helped to ensure that in February 23, for the first time, we met a new standard that we've adopted here called the Faster Diagnosis Standard. That means 75% of people referred urgently by their GP received a diagnosis or a rule out of cancer within 28 days. The sixth, and probably the final strand that I really wanted to dwell on a bit more today, was our innovation strand, which I hope I've demonstrated runs through the rest of the strategy, but we also have a specific strand which aims to harness and embed new technologies, new processes within our pathways to support earlier diagnosis. The basic aim is to speed up the path from innovation to adoption within the NHS, and our Cancer Innovation Open Call competition, which we ran in partnership with the Small Business Research Institute, has identified products and approaches in the late stages of development which have sort of proven their clinical effectiveness and are ready for rollout in the real world. To date, we've invested more than £20 million in 14 projects, which include medical devices, in vitro diagnostics, digital health solutions, behavioural interventions, software, AI, and new models of care. The most recent competition, which I think the winners were announced just last week, weren't they, Gillian? Include a pathway to enable more genetic testing of people at high risk of breast cancer. That we had a multi-layered digital approach to increase the early detection of bowel cancer, and innovations that support the early detection and diagnosis of skin, liver, ovarian and esophageal cancers. So there's a really good spread of cancers covered by this innovation fund. And Gillian will say more about one innovation, Cytosponge, later this morning. We're expecting, get your pens out, because we're expecting to launch a third open call in the next year. These calls in the past have been open to single organisations based in the UK or EU, including companies, charities, universities, NHS providers. And we would really encourage international organisations to partner with these organisations to submit an application. And the NHS is also running several non-cancer specific competitions that may be of interest too, covering areas like artificial intelligence, net zero and health inequalities. And you can find out more about all of these competitions on the SBRI website. I did also want to mention one final innovation, which forms part of our wider early diagnosis strategy, our partnership with Grail to test the effectiveness of its Gallery test, which essentially exploits circulating DNA as a screening tool in asymptomatic patients, which has the potential to diagnose up to around 50 cancers at an earliest, many of which at an earlier stage than we've been able to do previously. Ordinarily, programs like the Gallery screening program would require trials, then long-term follow-up for at least 5 or 10 years. What we've done at NHS England is entered into a commercial partnership with Grail to speed up this process. The NHS Gallery trial has recruited 140,000 participants across England and is on track to deliver interim trial results by April next year. Subject to those results, we've committed to roll out the Gallery test to 1 million more people across 24-25 and 25-26, with a view, we hope, to a national rollout from 2026 if the results support that. The Gallery test has the potential really to transform our approach to the earlier diagnosis of cancer, turbocharge our wider early diagnosis strategy. And I think it really demonstrates how the NHS is at the forefront of efforts internationally. No one else is trialling the Gallery test on anything like this scale to translate innovation into clinical practice. Even while we wait for the results of that trial, the wider early diagnosis strategy that I've sort of sketched out for you today is starting to have a real impact. As I said at the start, those early diagnosis rates have been flatlining at around 54-55% for a decade. You look at the graph, it is literally a horizontal line like that since 2013. For the first time in a decade, we have actually got that line to shift. The latest 12-month average, which takes us to December 22, puts early stage, the proportion of cancers diagnosed at an early stage at around 57.5%. That sort of shift, that couple of percentage point shift may not seem much, but is actually, in the context of the work we're doing as a program, really quite significant. And there is plenty more to come. As I said earlier, lung is only rolled out to a quarter of the country at the moment, and we are committed to rolling it out to the rest of the country by 28, 29. I've said enough. I've probably said too much. I hope our experience of our early diagnosis strategy is helpful to colleagues in ASEAN. But as much as anything, I want to hear more about what you're doing today, because what I want to do is draw on your experience, your insights, so that we can augment what we're doing on early diagnosis so that we can go even further and faster than we have already. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you again for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you very much, David. And we'll come back to you a little bit later when you're in the panel to put a few questions to you. Lots of food for thought, in particular on innovation, and love to sort of explore how you're creating the thread of innovation within the NHS. But joining us from Southeast Asia, we're delighted to have Dr. Kaw Swee Keng, the chairman of the Healthcare Working Group of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, who chairs the group on an annual basis, who is based in Kuala Lumpur, to join us. Dr. Kaw Swee Keng, over to you in Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you, Alan. Alan, just want to check that you can see me and hear me and see my screen. We'll do that first.
We can indeed, Dr. Kaw.
Great, thank you. I'm actually a Malaysian based in Singapore. So hello from Singapore for everyone. Pleased to be here to speak with you a little bit about the future of cancer services, focus on the ASEAN experience. So I'll begin with two slides. If I may, the first slide is just a disclosure slide that there are no conflicts of interest, and the opinions expressed are entirely my own. So I'm a health systems specialist, and I previously worked as a medical doctor and also in pharma, covering various countries. And these days I do a variety of roles, mostly specializing in primary care and health systems and startups in Southeast Asia. So these are my disclosures and intro. I really just have this one slide here on your screen right now. So please allow me to maybe take 3 minutes or 4 minutes on the future of cancer services in Southeast Asia. I'd like to focus on three takeaways for everyone in the audience today. The first takeaway on the left-hand side of the screen is that oncology deep tech, however one defines deep tech in ASEAN, is thriving. And I'm pleased to bring you this good news. Secondly, however, it is not enough to have science. It is not enough to have the most cutting edge of genomics or genetics or liquid biopsies or CAR-T therapies and antibody drug conjugates, because oncology must integrate with health systems. Technology alone is not able to save us all. Thirdly, is that ancillary systems must also be nurtured for oncology and cancer services in Southeast Asia, and also, frankly, in the UK and many other countries around the world. So a pure focus on technology alone is not going to save us all, because health is unfortunately, or whether not fortunate or unfortunate, health is definitely political, social, economic, as well as scientific. So with that in mind, my friends and ladies and gentlemen, let's go on to the first, good news from Southeast Asia. Is that deep tech for oncology in Southeast Asia is thriving for three main sub-analyses. The first one is that there's increasing depth of expertise. So there's a deeper research bench. There are organizations like A-Star in Singapore and, well, nascent A-Stars in many other countries in Southeast Asia, especially in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and also the Philippines. Many of these research institutes don't really get a lot of international exposure, but they do excellent work. Why? Because there are more oncologists that are trained in Southeast Asia, especially as Southeast Asia becomes richer and more populous and better educated. And finally, there's also higher public priority for cancer. So because of this deeper research bench, more oncologists in clinical practice, and also higher public priority for cancer, the deep tech environment for oncology in Southeast Asia is thriving. Secondly, Southeast Asia is genetically diverse. 650 million people is easily 10 times the size of the United Kingdom. And there's a diverse genetic profile of Malays and Chinese and Indo-Chinese and Indians, because Southeast Asia has been a hub for migration for at least 150, maybe even 200 years. So you've got a diverse genetic profile enabling you to do excellent clinical trials. You can see the world almost in one region, if you're going to paraphrase the Persian poet Rumi. Thirdly, oncology deep tech in Southeast Asia is thriving because of increased biotech funding. So in 2021, this was unfortunately though, before the startup winter at the moment, just biotech alone received $680 million of funding in 2021, which is 5 times more than in 2020 combined. So we hope that the startup winter will go away. And for these reasons, we think that deep tech in Southeast Asia is thriving. But tech alone, like I've mentioned earlier, is not going to save us. Oncology must secondly integrate with health systems. So here maybe for the scientists in the room, if I can perhaps share a few observations and reflections. Firstly, the start of collection of HEOR, or health economics and outcomes research data, could be started early so that it increases the chances of regulatory approval and also reimbursement. And secondly, there's this twin aims of delivering public policy, which means that scientists must also pair themselves up with government affairs and public policy teams so that we can support advocacy, while at the same time nurturing innovative funding. In other words, I think the NHS model, where the state essentially pays for everything, and the welfare state model, which is predominant in Europe, is not easily transplantable to Southeast Asia. As one high-level number, 53%, that's more than half of all healthcare spending in Southeast Asia before COVID, is in the private sector. To repeat, 53% or more than half of all healthcare spending before COVID is in the private sector. COVID is, or rather paid for in the private sector, not paid for by the government sector. So because of this, shall we say, diverse streams of funding for healthcare, for oncology services, and also for just social care and welfare services as a whole in Southeast Asia, that is not, shall we say, 80 or 90% dependent on the government, scientists, cancer startups, and oncologists need to nurture innovative funding as well, which brings me to my final point, that ancillary systems exist outside the health system as well. Cancer support systems are not just science and physical care. We need mental and social care. But of course, scientists cannot fix all the problems in the world, just that we need to be aware of all the different problems and to be part of the solution rather than just part of the problem. Meaning to say, in more practical terms, microinsurance and sustainable funding, innovative care models and primary care, especially important for an archipelagic Southeast Asia, where we're not one island, we're a million, okay, maybe not a million, but maybe 700,000, sorry, I apologize for that number again, 7,000 islands for the Philippines and the Indonesia and so on. We're talking about many different islands in an archipelago requiring innovative care models and also primary care with microinsurance and sustainable funding to support cancer services all around. All I'm saying is that cancer is beatable at the final analysis if we combine science and systems and not so much only focus on the science itself. And as the co-chair of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council Healthcare Working Group, we're delighted to partner our colleagues in the United Kingdom with whom we share many historical and diplomatic relationships. And we hope that this will be the beginning of a long and very rewarding partnership for everyone as we improve population access to cancer services in Southeast Asia. Thanks again to Ellen and my friends. Over to you, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaur, for that tour de force of the situation in Southeast Asia. And we look forward to having you back in the panel a little bit later on. Staying in Singapore, we're delighted to now have Thi Hui Hao, the Vice President of International Oncology for AstraZeneca. Thi Hui, over to you.
Good. Thank you very much, Alan. Just want to check if you can see my screen, okay?
We can indeed. Thank you.
Okay, and just putting it onto the slideshow. Perfect. So, first and foremost, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk about, our bold and vision of eliminating cancer as a cause of death. But perhaps, just to start off with a quick introduction of AstraZeneca. We are science-based.
Sorry, we can't hear you very well.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you need to mute something there. Sorry.
Testing, can you hear me better now?
There is still echo.
Okay, let me, just do a quick system check.
You have maybe another laptop there, maybe.
Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is this better? Okay, can you hear me now?
That's much better. Thank you, Thi Hui.
Okay, Well, okay, let me start again by putting my screen on slideshow. Okay, so yeah, so let me just briefly introduce AstraZeneca first. We are, science-based biopharmaceutical company, and we are currently the #1 UK company by market capitalization. And we spend as much as 1/4 of our revenue reinvesting it back to R&D to develop the next generation of innovations. At the same time, we take our sustainability responsibilities very seriously. So that by 2026, we expect 98% of our scope 1 and 2 greenhouse emissions to be eliminated. And we expect to be carbon negative by 2030. But getting back to the topic on hand on cancer, just as a reference point, COVID-19 over the last 3 years have taken about 7 million lives. But in 2020 alone, cancer itself have taken more than 10 million lives, right? And 70% of that comes from low and middle income countries. So in many ways, it's actually a silent pandemic. I'll just draw your attention to the two maps on the left-hand side. They look practically identical, but they are not. The top graph shows premature cancer mortality. So, people dying of cancer under the age of 70. And the bottom chart is based on the United Nations Human Development Index. And you see the color coding is more or less different, which shows really there's a high correlation between Human Development Index and the probability of dying early of cancer. Earlier on, our earlier speaker already referred to the number of new cancer cases and deaths within ASEAN. But what is also interesting is that there's a slightly different flavor of cancer within ASEAN itself. For example, in this part of the world, we have the highest incidence of GI cancers and lung cancer. And also, as Dr. Kaur mentioned, we have a very diverse genetic profile in ASEAN, but we are also unique in a number of ways. So this slide looks a little bit technical, but if I may just help orientate you a little bit to the graph on the two pie charts on the right-hand side, and just focus on the words that says EGFR and KRAS. These are the two most common type of mutations in lung cancer, right? But if you can see on the right-hand side, Caucasians, the incidence of what we call EGFR lung cancer is about 15 to 25%. The other type, which we call KRAS, is another 1/4 or so, right? If you compare that to Asia, half of the patients are actually of the EGFR. Now, why is this important? The reason why it's important is because the treatment modality, how we treat these cancers are actually different. So you can see, when we talk about treating cancers within Asia and within ASEAN, we need to make sure that, research and development is also taking into consideration these different profiles, right? So let me talk a little bit about how AstraZeneca is developing science to transform cancer outcomes. Let me refer you to the chart on the left-hand side first. And if you see the circle, on the right-hand side of the circle, so we have 5 different modalities that we are developing to directly kill the cancer cells, right? On the left-hand side, we're also working on different ways to be able to activate the immune system to attack the cancer cells. And you can actually combine different modalities from the left and the right, to combine to be able to hit the cancers harder. Now, what we want to be able to ultimately achieve then is to have the outcomes being transformed on the right-hand side. So today, it's the blue line on the curve. Typically, as David mentioned, we diagnose cancers too late. And then when we treat them, we get a little bit of a response, but high chances of recurrence, and then we treat them again and so on, right? But if we are able to look at technologies to detect cancers early, so David talked about the Gallery test from Grail, right? Using circulating tumor DNA. If we use that, we are able to detect cancers earlier. and then through the modalities that I talk about on the left, treat the cancers or hit the cancers harder. And then during the period when the patients are responding to treatment, are we able to continuously monitor them, again, through potentially using circulating tumor DNAs, so that even when we pick up early signs of recurrence that is not being able to pick up by conventional methods, we are able to hit the cancer hard again, right? So hopefully through this, we are able to then, potentially eliminate cancer as a cause of death. Now, when we talk about dealing with cancer, it's not just about the drug treatment itself. We also need to do, different things to be able to address the challenges ahead of us. So, for example, David talked very passionately about investing early screening and diagnosis, because that gives the patients the best chance of remission or cure, right? At the same time, we want to invest in precision medicine. Now, that is important for a couple of reasons. One is we're able to make sure that we give the right treatment to the right patients. At the same time, by doing so, it increases the effectiveness of the treatment and also reduce wastage from the very limited healthcare resources that we have. I think the other thing that we need to do is also improve access to treatment of the new drugs and innovations that's coming out, right? So what we've done in AstraZeneca, for example, is to train healthcare workers as well as reach almost 45 million patients through our access programs. And finally, we need to look at cancer care beyond treatment itself. So a couple of things that we have done includes, well, Cancer Can Give is an example of a program that we have partnered with patient advocacy groups to empower cancer survivors to give back to the society. The other thing that we're doing, in many emerging markets is, capacity building of the healthcare systems. And this is a program which we call Act for Cancer Care. Finally, I want to just talk about our sustainability responsibilities. So as a pharma company, our first responsibility in sustainability is, of course, supporting equitable access to healthcare, as mentioned. It's also important to realize that we also need to make sure that we focus on ethics and transparency, including diversity and inclusion in both our workplace, of course, but also in clinical trials, because as I mentioned earlier on, the profile of cancer can be very different in different parts of the world. I think finally, we need to talk about climate change, even within this context, because climate change is a collective problem. When we talk about greenhouse emission, it's not just about oil companies, it's not about cars, it's not about airlines. Healthcare sector collectively contribute to 5% of greenhouse gases. And poor health costs the world 15% of global GDP. So I just want to close by saying that, tackling health and sustainability is actually inseparable and it's a collective responsibility. With that, I thank you very much for listening, and I hand it back over to Alan.
Tihui, before you go, if I can just put one question to you, please. One of the major themes for ASEAN this year is inclusiveness, making sure that everyone benefits from the work that ASEAN is doing. You've mentioned that cancer burden is growing, with global cancer incidences estimated to increase from 19 million in 2020 to 30 million in 2024. Now, this will place a huge strain on costs to the public health system and to patients, factoring in the costs of new and innovative cancer treatments. How can we ensure a balance between the cost of cancer care and access to treatment for all patients everywhere?
No, I think that's a great question. And you see, the increase in cancer incidence is partly driven by aging population, but also environmental factors, just like other non-communicable diseases. So obviously, like you said, it poses a very heavy burden on healthcare systems everywhere. And specifically for cancer, to ensure efficient use of resources, we need to, number one, as David mentioned, prevent cancers where we can and catch them as early as possible when they do occur. And some cancers are actually very preventable. For example, cervical cancer is actually preventable by administering a vaccine, right? The HPV vaccine, for example. And David also mentioned it's a lot cheaper to treat cancers earlier, and patients have a better chance of remission as well. So healthcare systems really need to invest in prevention and screening strategies. We already see some markets in Asia doing that, but a lot more can be done. And I think when it comes to new and innovative treatments, the price of medicines, for example, need to reflect the value of the innovation that it brings, of course. But we need to recognize the economic disparities in the different countries. And therefore, in AstraZeneca, for example, we partner with the different stakeholders, including governments, NGOs, charities, to expand access of life-changing medicines through patient access program. Right. So ultimately, the solution in addressing the silent pandemics needs to be a concerted effort, right? Which includes, number one, preventing cancer where possible. Number two, screen and catch them early. And number three, expand access to diagnosis and treatment. So if all the stakeholders come together, like the governments, academia, industry, advocacy groups, and so on, work together, then there's hope, for us to one day be able to eliminate cancers because of that.
Thank you so much, Tiffin. Lots of food for thought for us for our panel discussion a little bit later on, and indeed for our ongoing work with the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and the ASEAN Secretariat. Thank you so much for joining us, Tiffin, and look forward to joining us again on another occasion. Following on from these presentations, we have some excellent case studies that will be followed by the panel discussion, which I've mentioned earlier. To introduce our case studies, it is my absolute pleasure to invite Chris Bourne, NHS Innovation Specialist at the Department for Business and Trade and a key driver for this event, to the stage. Chris, floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Alan. Thank you. Well, we've had some fantastic talks already. It's quite a packed program, so we need to get on. My name's, as Alan says, Chris Bourne, and I'd like to welcome you as well on behalf of the Department for Business and Trade. Healthcare UK is part of it's a health sector element of the Department of Business and Trade, and this is part of a series of events we're putting on to talk about NHS innovation, experience innovation, how we can collaborate with other countries across the world and across our main markets. So very pleased to be here, and thank you again to all the speakers and participants for coming, and for obviously the UK ASEAN Business Council for being such a great partner in this. So let's not waste any time, but I'd like to get on now to delve down a bit into some of the particular examples of how we're innovating in the UK and in ASEAN on cancer services. And I'd like to introduce Roger Spencer, who's the Chief Executive of the Christie NHS Foundation Trust, which is one of the biggest cancer hospitals in Europe. Roger.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words this morning. I've been asked to talk a little bit about how we spread innovation in our hospital, the Christie, and give you a couple of examples of how we go about doing that, and then mention some of the things that we are able to offer in support of developing cancer services innovation with other colleagues, and not just here in the UK, but elsewhere. And we've got some little experience of that. As Chris has reminded me at the start, the Christie is the largest single-site cancer centre in Europe. And for those people that don't know, it's situated in Manchester, the south of Manchester, equidistant between two small, little-known football clubs, Manchester City and Manchester United. And that's probably the most useful thing that I have to locate it when talking about things a little bit further beyond the UK. So we serve a primary population at the Christie of 3.2 million people across the northwest of England, and our treatment levels are something in the order of about 60,000 patients annually. And our aim at the Christie for over 100 years now has been to learn from every patient that we look after. That's our aim. And we also aim to offer and engage all of our patients in innovative new treatments. And what we want to do, of course, is apply the knowledge we gain from that to the future opportunities for cancer patients, not just now and not just at the Christie, but elsewhere. And that's been our mission, as I say, for over 100 years. When a patient of ours exhausts standard treatment, our ambition is to make sure we can offer a trial treatment to that patient. At the moment, we have 900 trials open and available to patients. And indeed, if we can't find a suitable alternative trial treatment for a patient, it's our mission to work with partner organisations to try and find a suitable trial for our patient. That's our initial approach to how we do this. So how do we actually do this in practice? What goes on in practice at the Christie? Well, our approach is to invest and develop our capabilities in people, in platforms, research platforms, and infrastructure that's needed. And I'll give you a couple of small examples, but just to say, at the moment, we have about 350 core research staff out of a total organisation of delivery of 4,000 staff. And most importantly, we have over 100 PIs leading clinical research trials in our organisation. And it's really important that we focus our efforts to try and integrate our research activities with the service deliveries that we've got. So a couple of important case examples in my organisation would be, the first I'd talk about is proton therapy service. So at the Christie, we were the first UK proton therapy service organisation. We started delivering proton therapy treatment for patients in the UK in 2018. And at the same time as we put together that service, we invested in research capability in that service. So we have dedicated basic translational research room in the facility. And we also commissioned sufficient clinical trial capacity in that study service so that we could develop and expand the indications based on novel trials that could be put in for patients that exhaust standard treatment in that facility. It's led us to be able to also develop our educational opportunities for proton services. So not just in the application of novel approaches using proton therapy, but in the development and education of staff to set up, deliver and run a proton service. And we have a number of colleagues across various parts of the world now who are enrolled in our proton school that are undertaking those activities. The second area I just make mention of as a case example, where we've taken this approach to combining the development of our research capability with service, has been in the introduction of cellular therapies. So we were one of the first centres in the UK to deliver NHS commissioned CAR-T therapy, and building the capability to deliver that. In addition, we built the capability to deliver a research consortia that are aimed at developing the introduction of further cellular therapies into NHS service. And we have a programme called IMATCH, the Innovate Manchester Advanced Cellular Therapy Hub, that's been running for some time now, which is a consortia of NHS and SME organisations that are aimed at providing the capability and platforms for the introduction of novel cellular therapies. And it's important to be clear that we've got to connect those things together and collaborate with all of the necessary partners to develop those capabilities, as we had to with the delivery of service, but even more importantly, in the innovation for the development of those new therapies. So there are two examples of how we are delivering research innovation in cancer services at the Christie, but important to say that those approaches enable us to have capability and capacity that we can apply elsewhere beyond the walls of the Christie because of our experiences in setting up and delivering those opportunities. And we have a number of programs to provide education and training, in particular in some of these highly specialized areas. We have many opportunities for fellowships, for training at the Christie, and for taking faculty to other parts of the world to implement such training. And we also have some experience of developing services, planning and technically advising on the introduction and support of these specialist services in different parts of the world. Significant activities, particularly in consortia of other NHS organisations at the moment in Africa. We've done some considerable educational opportunity work in China and in India. And we want to make sure that we can leverage the experiences that we gain in that innovation at the Christie for the benefit of patients across the globe. I'll stop there. Thank you, Chris. There's lots more I'd like to be able to discuss with colleagues in this very exciting cancer services development activities.
Thanks very much indeed, Nicholas. Thanks very much. And you heard the offer of collaboration there, working with other NHS trusts. I'd like to next introduce Louise Jopling, Dr. Louise Jopling, who's from one of our academic health science networks, in this case from the east of England, who's going to talk about how we develop cancer services through collaboration with other parts of the industry.
Lovely. Thank you, Chris. And I'm delighted to be here today to represent the Academic Health Science Network on a national footprint and just give an overview of how we are structured and our remit to support future health services. But obviously today we are focused on cancer services. So what are academic health science networks? We have been in existence for over 10 years now, and our core funding comes from the NHS and the Office for Life Sciences. We are 15 organisations across England, and we are locally embedded within each of our local health and social care systems, working with system stakeholders. And we sit at that really privileged interface between industry, whether that's a single person startup through to an AstraZeneca or equivalent that we've heard from earlier. And we help those industry partners to develop their value propositions so that then when we can make those appropriate introductions to our health and social care systems, that there's a much stronger pull from the system and more likely to benefit the population. So we are catalysts for innovation for the reasons that I outlined, and we really look for pathway transformational technologies and innovation that we can bring to our system. We connect those partners across sectors, and we may, in a pathway transformation approach, look to work with a number of different innovators that have technologies that work at different points along that pathway, or ultimately complementing what we expect as improved patient outcomes from joining up and synergizing those offerings. We create those right conditions for change, whether that is through some education for workforce, but also for bringing and working with those innovators and building the gaps and plugging those gaps potentially for what their value proposition may be. And we operate at a local level. I showed the 15 geographies, but we collaborate together. We've got counterparts in the audience from different parts of England here today, because we collaborate nationally. We don't just want to pilot and test innovations within our unique geographies, we want to spread what works as quickly at a national, but also by working with partners today and online to other geographies as well. So the context for our drivers, for our international work, fitting with NHS and UK government priorities. And we've heard about the long-term plan, particularly in the context of cancer services. So it's increasing that detection of stage 1 and 2 cancers. So intervening as early as we possibly can. And aligning with our strategic aim, and that's primarily from our Office for Life Sciences Commission, to drive economic growth for our UK businesses going elsewhere, and those can derive from within our hospitals and our clinical settings, as well as some of the startups in our life sciences clusters. And the third point really does embody what we're all here today to do, to learn from that knowledge exchange, whether it's from an individual system just down the road from ourselves or from the variety of countries represented across the ASEAN region. And what we do, and this is particularly focusing on an international context, with respect to the first pillar on the left-hand side, with respect to export, obviously that innovation from within the NHS, from our clinical innovators, our clinical entrepreneurs, we support and nurture that so that it can scale beyond the walls of their own department, can reach nationally, as well as beyond our borders. And we work with organisations such as Healthcare UK and Department of Business and Trade. And it's by speaking internationally ourselves, as well as welcoming international delegations to our ecosystem and our geographies, that we can really build that partnership. And we've had examples where countries have asked for us to showcase certain innovations in a particular space, whether that is in oncology, cardiovascular disease, etc. So we're able to do that in a knowledge exchange, innovation exchange context, so that we get to share and learn from all of you. And then finally, we provide innovation expertise. So obviously for organisations from within the UK, but also from other geographies that wish to understand and navigate the complex health and social care system, we have that tacit knowledge from being embedded ourselves. But we can also export our own intellectual assets, so that we can bring UK innovations to your geographies and re-emphasize that knowledge exchange. I won't go into the next example very much, because I know that we will hear about Cytosponge. This has been mentioned before for one, and will be reflected in one of the next talks. I just wanted to provide 2 one-page examples. These both happen to derive from Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, which is where my office is based. And this very much feeds this technology over the past 20+ years from a clinical innovator, but now is very much being used across acute and primary care for early detection of Barrett's esophagus. And we have worked with the innovator in the context of developing communication strategies and developing some of those earlier health economic assessments. Our focus also on this technology, this is a much earlier startup company called 52 North Health, an oncologist based out of Addenbrooke's Hospital, so real clinical innovator that we have been working with for at least 4 years now, providing funding, but also insights. And this is as care is potentially moving closer to home in certain contexts as well. remote monitoring. And I was delighted to hear from Sarah with respect to the medtech focus across ASEAN. And we have many other examples across the national network, but this is very much a blood test in the community at home for patients that are on chemotherapy, and to determine whether they are undergoing neutropenic sepsis, which is clearly very important to intervene early, if indeed they are, but to minimise them going in for inappropriate visits into the hospital. That also supports the net zero agenda as well, but also decreases patient anxiety. So there are a lot of data here. The company themselves have been on a number of US accelerators as well, and we are supporting them on a daily basis in the context of developing their UK health economic data. And obviously supporting, just on my penultimate slide, Chris, and supporting them in the context of raising funding through grants and other financial investment. So I'm going to finish there with a few web links just to, and I hope that that has given you a flavour for how we work at the Academic Health Science Network across not just cancer services, but also other high priority disease areas. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Louise. Thanks very much, Louise. As been trailed on a couple of talks, we have Gillian Rosenberg, who's going to talk about Cytosponge, and as a case example, works with David Fitzgerald on the cancer programme across England. And welcome, Gillian.
Thank you very much for having me here to speak, and thank you very much for all the previous introductions to Cytosponge that we've already had today. So what I'm going to do is talk to you about our Cytosponge innovation and use it as a case study for how we can really rapidly roll out and evaluate innovations within the NHS. So what I will do is talk to you about how we identified Cytosponge as a priority innovation, set up the pilot, evaluated it, and used those insights for our spread and adoption plan. So just to give you a bit of context for what the test is, first of all, it is a sponge on a string that is swallowed by the patient, and when it's extracted, pulls out cells from the esophagus, and analysis of these cells can give an indication of the presence of a precancerous condition, Barrett's esophagus, and in some cases, cancer as well. And what we wanted to do with this test, because it is less labour intensive, less invasive, and also much quicker and easier to deliver, is see if we can use this to actually more effectively triage patients on our endoscopy waiting lists. So how did we identify Cytosponge in the first place? Well, we undertook a large horizon scanning and assessment exercise, drawing on expertise from the clinical community, research community, regulators, and that patient community, and really looked at these innovations through 4 key lenses. The first was how they supported our strategic priorities. So doing this in the middle of 2020 at the height of the pandemic, with a rather large backlog already building up on our endoscopy waiting list, we were looking for things that could help support our COVID recovery aims. We wanted an innovation that already had proven clinical effectiveness through a number of clinical trials, something that had regulatory approval in some form, so this was a CE mark test already, but also that we had evidence of feasibility. So this was being piloted in a different use case in a handful of trusts. So that gave us confidence that this was actually a feasible test that could be rolled out. So we decided to implement a national pilot of Cytosponge in low risk, but not no risk patients, so routine referrals with acid reflux symptoms. And it was estimated that this could help reduce demand on endoscopies by between 40 to 60% in this cohort. We decided to do a phased rollout, so starting small in a few cancer alliances and expanding outwards. And to do this, set up an implementation plan that covered 3 main areas. So the first was clinical, so developing clinical guidelines, training, and risk escalation policies. The second, looking at evaluation, data collection, and how we would facilitate this to be able to assess this innovation. And the third, looking at operational setup. So things like what would the sites require in terms of supply, procurement, legal agreements, and so on. So we actually managed to set this up very quickly. So from having identified Cytosponge as our innovation in November 2020, within 3 months, we had our first site live in February, with the first data returns coming to us in April. As I said, we were doing a phased approach. So we wanted to look at 33 sites across 19 different cancer alliances. We had procured 10,000 devices and also procured a evaluation partner who was going to evaluate this for us. So to go in a bit more detail about the evaluation, it was really important that this would inform decision-making for future rollout of this test. So we had 4 main strands to our evaluation. Impact, so how this would actually perform in the real world. So for example, the actual reduction on our endoscopy waiting lists within this cohort. A process evaluation, looking at the barriers and enablers for the setup and delivery of this service. Patient experience, to ensure we had good patient acceptability of this test and good take-up across all patient demographics. And a health economic evaluation, to looking at the cost effectiveness of this test. And our final evaluation report is due later this summer, which we are eagerly awaiting. So the impact so far, well, we have delivered 6,600 Cytosponges and are on track to hit our 10,000 target by the end of this financial year. We're actually live in 38 sites, so 5 more than originally planned. Once this service was up and running, we had enthusiasm from other sites who wanted to join our pilot, so we onboarded them as well. The current data suggests 78% of patients are initially discharged from the waiting lists following a Cytosponge, but obviously we need longer follow-up data to see if people represent, but that has been very positive to see this impact. And the initial findings from the evaluation are showing good clinical and patient acceptability where these services are live. So what are we going to do with that information? Well, very much the plan is that this will be supporting our plans for spread and adoption. So within this routine reflux cohort, using the evaluation data to support the rollout of this within local systems. So supporting things like business cases, procurement activities, and plans for the setup and delivery of these clinics. We've expanded in secondary care to look at Barrett surveillance patients as well. So using the insights from our pilot, using the insights, combining this with data from other studies to build the evidence base for this second patient cohort as well. And we're also looking at taking this into primary care. To fund, so we've just announced £3.4 million of funding to look at Cytosponge as a proactive case finding tool within primary care. So that's just a summary of one of our innovations, and hopefully that gives you some insight for how we can very quickly roll out and evaluate our innovations to speed up the pathway into clinical care. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gillian. Really encouraging example. Thank you so much. Well, we've had some fantastic speakers, haven't we? But we've got 2 further amazing speakers to come. So back to ASEAN now, to our good friend, Dr. Ben Widadja, who's head of the Mandaya group of hospitals based in Indonesia. And hopefully, Ben, you can join us.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. A very good morning from Jakarta, Indonesia. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much for the time. My name is Ben Widadja. I'm the President Director of Mandaya Hospital Group. And I've been asked to share a little bit about cancer services in Indonesia and how Mandaya, our hospital, deliver our service to our patients, since Mandaya hospital's main focus is actually in oncology. So Indonesia by itself has almost 300 million population. So the market is huge for healthcare in Indonesia. And cancer is still the #2 cause of death in Indonesia. And in terms of the data for financial burden for the government, this is from BPJS, which is the government insurance equivalent to the NHS. So cancer is actually number 2 right after cardiology. But I mean, this is a very exciting time for healthcare in Indonesia, particularly for cancer, because our Ministry of Health and also the government, they have been introducing the 6 pillars of healthcare transformation. So they're going to do a huge transformation in terms of primary care, referral services. So we're talking about hospitals. Number 3 is the healthcare resilience. So they really want people to invest in manufacturing of pharmaceutical manufacturing and also manufacturing of medical equipments in Indonesia. And number 4 is healthcare financing. 5, they have actually identified that now they want to invest in more hospitals, but they don't have enough human resources, which is the doctors and the supporting staff. And of course, the last one, number 6, is the IT, the medical technology. I mean, why this is very exciting for cancer is mainly for this number 2, 3, and 5, I think. So basically, the Ministry of Health has identified a few challenges. And I think number 1 is the lack of access to cancer services. So the plan is the government is going to increase the number of referral hospitals for cancer. So 1 in each province, and we are talking about more than 30 provinces in Indonesia. And at the moment, we only have less than, I think, 5 for those referral hospitals for cancer. And they're going to invest a lot of money in oncology-related medical equipment. So, I mean, one of the shocking things in Indonesia is that we only have 3 centers with PET scan, which can do FDG-based diagnosis, only 3 for the whole 300 million population. And the government is now really pushing a lot on this investment, especially for radiotherapy, nuclear medicine, for PET and SPECT-CT, for example. And they said they're going to invest in 3 proton scan for the whole country as well within the next few years. So it's a huge jump. Number 3 is also increased number of hospitals, increase the number of hospitals with international collaboration. So we are really pushing hospitals, if, you know, like us, private hospital like us as well, to collaborate with international partners. Number 2 is the lack of access to latest drug and therapy. So they want foreign companies to invest and bring and make it easier for them to bring the latest drugs to Indonesia. Number 3 is the lack of human resources, doctors, nurses, and everything else related to oncology. So they want to improve the local training capacity. And number 2, which is very exciting, is they really put in money on scholarships for Indonesian doctors for specialty training or fellowships overseas as well. So I think that's a lot of opportunity for collaboration there. And I think when we talk about this is our hospital, Mandaya Royal Hospital Puri, which is based in Jakarta, Indonesia. And again, one of our main focus or center of excellence is in oncology, and with the Mandaya Advanced Cancer Center. So at the moment, we have 29 oncology doctors or the team, and we are one of the few hospitals in Indonesia, I think less than 5 hospitals, which can offer a full range of oncology services, starting from surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, nuclear medicine, with our own dedicated cyclotron in our hospital, and also digital pathology and palliative care as well. And I mean, one of the example of what we are trying to do in Indonesia in terms of transformation of cancer service delivery is that we have identified that in Mandaya, we are not actually selling a product and we are not actually selling a service. But what we are trying to do is we are trying to provide our patients and their family members an experience, even during that most difficult time. And, you know, getting the right medical diagnosis, getting the best treatment, of course, that's number 1, and that's the most important for the patient. But I believe that sometimes we forget that we are not treating the cancer, but we are actually treating a person who is struggling with cancer. And that's what I think some of the new innovation, new ideas that we try to implement in Mandaya is to ensure that our patients and their family has the best experience even during their most difficult time. And if I can just give you a couple of examples, I hope I can show this video. I mean, number one is about radiotherapy. I'll just show you the video. Yes, so I mean, we have actually invested in, I mean, one of the latest linear accelerator and also with a full immersive ambient experience. So cancer itself, fighting cancer is a scary experience for our patients, but we don't want them, you know, when they come to our hospital to feel that our hospital is a scary place for them. So we always think about how we can make sure that the hospital feel very, very friendly. And I mean, this is very popular for the children as well, because the children can actually choose the kind of videos or cartoons that they actually want to watch during the treatment itself. And number two is about our inpatient experience. We know that cancer patients, most of the time, they need to spend time, a long time in the hospital, you know, being hospitalized multiple times. So we want to make sure that our hospital doesn't feel scary and they feel at home, or some of them, they feel that they're actually having a holiday in a very nice 5-star hotel as well. Since, you know, one of our room, we actually even have a dining table for the family to have dinner with the patients, and we actually have a massage chair as well. And we do have a special dedicated area, 22 hotel rooms on the same floor as the critical care areas, because we do understand that most of the time, Asian families, they want to be close to the patients during their most critical time. I mean, this is something that we are very proud of as well. We actually are one of the few hospitals with a dedicated radio ablation or nuclear medicine isolation room. And we really create a very nice room, very comfortable stay for them. And we even have a very popular robot, especially for the pediatric patients, so that our doctors can have a chat with them every day. And we do prepare a family consultation room on every department in our hospital, where our doctors and the team can actually present and discuss and answer all the questions that our patients and their family have. And they can actually share the screen, all the results, the EMR results, PACS results with the patient. And that is, I mean, we really create this room so that we want to sort of encourage our doctors to do this as often as possible. And number three is the collaboration with international partners. For cancer, we do have a collaboration of Cleveland Clinic in the US. We do have a collaboration with Royal Brompton and Harefield Hospital as well, but that's for cardiology mainly. But again, we are very open, and I think most Indonesian hospitals, including the government hospitals, they are very open for potential collaboration. Some of them might include like sort of a joint MDT or second opinion program, referral of patients for further management, for example, because we don't have a proton therapy currently running, so we can refer patients to the UK for more advanced treatment. We can't do bone marrow transplant in the whole country. Nobody can do it, so we might be able to refer those patients if that's possible. Number three is referral for lab or pathology samples, you know, for more advanced diagnostic testings, because most of these are not actually available. So we are actually at Mandaya ourselves, we are actually looking for international partners where we can actually send our samples for more advanced genetic testings, pharmacogenomics, or you know, cancer surveillance. And number four is education, so joint webinars, short courses, observership, fellowships as well, because you know, our government is actually putting in some budget for scholarships for those fellowships especially, and observerships overseas. We can do joint research, and also most likely to support us in setting up new services, which may not be available in Indonesia at the moment. Yeah, so I hope with this kind of potential in international collaboration with the UK, with NHS. NHS can help us to improve access to the best cancer care in Indonesia. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Ben. Thank you very much. And thanks for emphasizing the patient experience, the family experience. Thank you. And now we have a speaker from another NHS organization, Dr. Majid Kazmi, who's going to come and speak to us about the experience in Guy's and St Thomas's and in cancer development, cancer discovery.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you to the organisers for allowing me to speak. I think I'm the last one, so and it's been quite an intensive morning of really interesting talks. Just reflecting on 25 years almost of practicing in cancer medicine, I think a couple of things I would say is, one is cancer is a disease that gets more common as you get older. It took 120 years for the French population to double its the percentage of people over the age of 65. In Thailand, that's going to happen in 20 years. Now, it takes 20 years to train an oncologist. So we've got a real challenge ahead of us. Health inflation on top of that far outstrips any other kind of inflation. So when I started, I treated myeloma predominantly. Cost about £2,000 a year to treat a myeloma patient when I first started. We're now spending £20,000 to £30,000 a month per patient. So we've got real challenges ahead of us, and it's a global challenge as we've articulated today. So what are we doing at Guy's and St Thomas's, which is where I work? We're looking at technology, and I'm going to really focus this morning on medtech in interventions that we've been looking at. And when we've tried to adopt medical innovation, we've really taken three guiding principles. So one is it better for patients, both in terms of outcomes and experience? Secondly, is it better for staff, both in terms of their ability to release time to care, but also their more accurate decision-making and getting the decisions right at the right time? And then thirdly, is it better for the wider healthcare system, and can it be translatable and scalable? So taking those three principles, we have three pillars in our cancer strategy, which are aligned with the National Cancer Plan, which you've heard about earlier: early diagnosis, what I call precision oncology, which is increasingly important. So it's not just about getting the right drug or the right kind of treatment, which is very important, but also increasingly, as patients are living longer, making sure we reduce collateral damage. So that's really important. So managing things like peripheral neuropathy associated with chemotherapy, managing cardiotoxicity becomes increasingly important. And so the team that's required to manage cancer care is expanding all the time. It's not just the doctors and the nurses, it's a much wider team that I work with now. So just to give you some specific examples of some of the things we have done. So in early diagnosis space, we are working with a GP triage company. So what we've tried to work out, one of the things with early diagnosis, you need to have a degree of awareness that the patient may potentially have a cancer diagnosis. And we know that a lot of patients now in the UK, when they try and contact their primary care physician, go online and put in a series of questions and requesting an appointment. And what we thought we could do is work with the primary care triage tool to see whether, as you're putting in responses to certain questions, whether it starts to flag up that there could be a potential cancer diagnosis, and whether you can then speed up the referral pathway that way. And that's a project that's underway at the moment, and we're currently evaluating that in lung cancer and GI cancer. If I move to precision oncology, there's several things that we're doing in that space. So one is we're working with a radiotherapy company called Mirada, where we're doing what we call auto contouring. So one of the big challenges in radiotherapy, increasingly so, is the complex medical physics that's required to give the right dose of radiation to the right area. And so if you can use AI and you can use technology to do a lot of that planning for you, that allows other centers to just adopt the plan. So what you can do remotely is you can plan the patient, and then that treatment can be delivered locally where you may not have the medical physics expertise. So that's one example. The other examples that we're doing, we're working along clinical decision support. So one of the big resource intensive bits of the NHS is multidisciplinary meetings where we have all the right people in the room making a decision about each patient diagnosis and what the treatment plan should be. Now, we know that a lot of this, based on national and international guidance, could be automated. So we're working with a company called Deontics, which is a spin-out company, and we're looking to see whether we can take some of these patients out of an MDM conversation and just get an automatic decision by running it through this decision support tool. We reckon in prostate cancer, we can probably take 30 to 40% of patients out of an MDT conversation, which then allows the clinicians in the room to focus on the more complex cases and allow quicker treatments for the patients. We reckon we can save about 7 days on the cancer pathway by adopting this. Other examples around clinical trials matching. So we've heard a lot about clinical trials. One of the advantages we have in London is we're like the world on our doorstep. There's 160 languages spoken in our hospital. And so we have the world's population on our doorstep, but we know that recruitment to trials doesn't reflect that population. And, you know, when drugs are approved, at the moment, they're really approved on a very small, narrow population in the world. And we need to get better at doing that. And somehow, in some ways, can we use technology to do that? Now, increasingly, trials are becoming more complex. Trying to identify the right patient is more difficult. You're incorporating genomic data alongside clinical phenotypic data. That becomes a labor-intensive process. So what we're working with some companies is around whether that can be, again, automated using natural language processing, extracting information from EMRs, and then using that to identify patients much more rapidly. And then hopefully get around some of this unconscious bias around not talking to patients from different ethnic groups about clinical trials. So that's another example where we're currently active. And the third thing is around in theatres. So can we have expert help for surgeons in theatre? And we're working with a company called Proximi, who the chief executive of that company is a plastic surgeon at Guy's and St. Thomas's. And really what that allows you is to actually be in the operating theatre virtually. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to do complex surgery, advising and helping people at a distance when they're trying to do this kind of surgery, because we can actually see what's going on in real time using that software. And the other thing we're doing alongside that is with another company called Innosight, which is 3D modeling. So again, when we're trying to do surgical procedures and we want to make sure we've got the margins, we want to make sure we're not going to damage any important structures around the tumor, we can do that 3D modeling by taking 2D images that come from CT scans, MRI scans, and constructing a 3D model. That can then give the surgeon a really good idea of where they need to do their operating field. And we've been able to improve the safety of complex surgery, particularly around lung cancer and neurological cancers. Finally, I'll just mention living with and beyond cancer, which becomes increasingly important. And we're working with a company called Careology, which is looking at trying to act as a patient concierge right from the time they're diagnosed with cancer, supporting them all the way through, giving them the right advice when they need it, helping them with medicines, compliance, etc., but also signposting them to the relevant place they need to go if they need advice. So rather than constantly coming back to the healthcare system, if it's something simple that can self-manage or they can go to the local chemist or whatever, that again reduces the burden on a very pressured system in the NHS. And so with this complex ecosystems of different companies we're working with, what we hope to be able to do is to reduce the number of patients who have to constantly come up to hospital, because the reality is the NHS, like many other healthcare systems, has grown up organically. It's not designed around a patient. And cancer is a good example where it's becoming increasingly more of a chronic disease. We're managing more patients in their own homes. And we've heard about some of the innovations that are happening in that space around remote monitoring. This is going to be increasingly important. So whatever we can do to support patients to be managed better in their own home and allow us as specialist cancer centers to have line of sight over a much greater geography and a much greater population. So we have assurance that they're being well managed and looked after, and empowering patients to have the right information so they can make the right decisions themselves. These are all part of our kind of joined up strategy to deliver what I would say is 21st century cancer care. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you very much. Right, whilst the panel gather, that includes you, Madge, please, on this, like to come to the desk, and Roger, and unless you've got to go, Roger, you've got to go. You got to go. Okay, that's, well, David can come and join us, whoever's available to come and join us. I'd like to introduce Matt Cavanagh, who's, would you like to go to the lectern, Matt, and guide us from there, who's the Group Director of Government Relations at Prudential PLC, who's very kindly agreed to moderate this panel session. Thanks very much for coming, Matt, and I'll hand over to you. We've got various questions coming in on the Zoom, so do please add any further questions. We also invite questions from the room. I think, Matt, you've got some of them, but I'm happy to read any out if that's helpful.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks everyone. Look, there's been some really, you know, the purpose of today's forum is to showcase innovation and to share opportunities for collaboration. There's been some really great examples by all of the speakers, very rich content we've had today. So we've got a bit of time now for Q&A. I will try and make sure we finish on time. I've got a couple of questions already that have come in via Zoom, but also looking for others in the room. So if you have one in the room, please put your hand up. But if, you know, while we're waiting for that, I will start with the question from Alex Cole, who asked about good innovation centres in ASEAN that would help to develop and scale up medtech initiatives. And he said he's aware of the A-Star centre in Singapore, but are there any others? So I wonder whether Dr. Kaur, if you're still with us, you can give any other suggestions of places that can help spread this medtech technology.
Of course, thank you. Well, it depends on what we mean by medical technologies or medical devices. So leaving that aside, the definition of what is medtech, there are several cancer societies and organizations and research entities in Southeast Asia outside of A-Star. Let's start with Singapore. There's the National Cancer Centre for Singapore, NCCS. If you go to Thailand, there's the National Cancer Institute of Thailand, which is quite government run, but there's a lot of public-private partnerships together with the private sector there as well. In Malaysia, we've got the Clinical Research Malaysia, Cancer Research Malaysia. The founder for Cancer Research Malaysia is actually trained in Cambridge, and she retains a lot of connections with the UK as well. And this is an NGO that is self-funded and does excellent research in cancer research. So these are three examples. I'd like to turn the floor a bit to our colleague Ben Widaja, who may be able to shed a bit more light about the entities that are doing cancer research in Indonesia. If you don't mind, Ben, maybe over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eski. Basically, research, unfortunately, in Indonesia is not as huge like those in Malaysia, Singapore, or Thailand. But we do have basically the research institute in the main Faculty of Medicine, for example, in the University of Indonesia, and also the main oncology hospital in Darmais. I think those are the main two sites where all the research is going on. Yeah.
Thank you both. So great, we've got a question in the room here. Just wait for the microphone. If you could just introduce yourself briefly and then give us the question.
I think it's on. Hi, thank you. My name is Nev Young. I work for an academic health science network like Lou. I was going to ask the panel and colleagues in the Asian network. We've talked a lot this morning about innovation. I just wonder what people's attitudes are to data-driven decision-making in healthcare. We haven't really talked about AI or anything like that today. There's a little bit controversy in the news at the moment as well. But I think in healthcare, there's a massive drive to thinking about using data in smart ways to help make some of those decisions around how we care for our patients. I wonder if our panel would like to comment on that and colleagues in the Asian region as well.
Great question. Thank you. I don't know whether David or Louise, you want to say?
Dr. Madge would.
And Madge as well.
Is that right? Yeah, sure. You know, it's a very important question. And so we're spending a lot of time curating our data, making sure it's fit for purpose. So, you know, we were invested a lot of energy in getting that correct. We are now using that data retrospectively. So the stuff I talked about with the deontics, we had a retrospective data set. So we were able to test the tool, do the evaluation, And now we're doing it prospectively. And once that evaluation is done, we will then be able to deploy across the organization. But it's fair to say that, hopefully with things like NLP, you'll be able to, where you've got non-curated data, you'll be able to start to extract that in a much more meaningful way. And again, we've got a big investment at King's College with a system called CogStack, which is allowing us to do that. So yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, it's staggering now that, even in this day and age, in cancer medicine, when you look at drugs from pharma, still you're getting a 20 to 30% response rates with most of those therapies. And that means that you're getting it wrong in about 70% of patients. And that's because we don't have the right information when we're designing the studies, and we don't have the right way of tailoring our therapies better. So I think absolutely that data-driven medicine, and it's not just about drugs, it'll be about processes and huge inefficiencies in our processes because we just don't have the data.
Thanks, Maj. And Dr. Kaur, do you want to say anything about data from the ASEAN region?
Sure, thank you. I think the philosophical and also the policy and also the scientific challenges for data are the same for Southeast Asia and the United Kingdom and Europe as well. Maybe I'll share 2 or 3 thoughts over here. The first one is that it seems to me that medicine was previously evidence-based, and now we're talking data-driven. And I think semantics aside, there will be subtle differences and nuances between what's evidence and what's data, and maybe we need to factor that in our policy making and regulatory affairs as well. Point 1. The second point is to say that black box algorithms are almost never going to be helpful, meaning the companies that do clinical trials matching or artificial intelligence, while they will be helpful, I think transparency about the algorithms inside the AI and the data models and the machine learning models will be important to build trust. And I think black boxes don't work. The third and final point over here is let's call it the adoption cycle or the adoption take-up rate for health professionals that are inherently conservative. And we healthcare professionals, not only healthcare professionals, but also payers, and then finally patients, will have a bit of an adoption lag in terms of this cutting-edge technology as we get familiar with it and build trust. Those are my 3 thoughts on Southeast Asia. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. That's a great question. So we now another question online from Les Lindsay, which is about, they have a specific test for home diagnostic testing, which can be carried out by patients. And they are looking for providers in ASEAN who will be open for this and people they can talk to. I very much suggest that they talk to Chris or colleagues from Department of Business and Trade, because that's exactly what they're for, to try and help them find those opportunities. But I don't know whether, Ben, you have any thoughts on that, whether hospitals and other providers are open to being approached by startups with this kind of technology?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think, I've personally been approached with startups from other ASEAN countries, from Singapore, Malaysia as well, and of course from European countries too. And I think the question is that when someone approached me, the things that we always consider is the legal aspects of it, because a lot of the startup companies, they want to come to Indonesia, but they have no idea on how to actually deliver their products to Indonesia, because you have all the licenses that they need to do. For example, with this kind of products, they need to have a local distributor, for example. They don't actually know where to find the local distributors. And I think in a way, if there is a UK companies or startup companies who want to enter Indonesian market, I believe that they need to have like a body or a help from someone who can, guide them through that path until they can actually deliver their product to Indonesia, because that's where most of the failure actually comes in. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. The only thing I would say is, I'm here representing Prudential. We're a health insurer, UK based, but with businesses across the whole of about 9 out of 10 ASEAN countries. And I would very much encourage startups to approach insurers as well, because we are absolutely interested in investing in technology, the kind of either for testing and screening or patient monitoring, which several of our speakers have talked about today, because this is definitely an area where there is complete alignment between patients and physicians and insurers. Because if we can invest early, that also reduces the cost to insurers as well. So hopefully this is an area where we can all work together. So and I know that there's a capacity problem, and as Ben says, you know, have people got local partners and so on. But that's something that a big insurance company could, in theory, be able to help with. And most of us are developing initiatives within our organizations to try and help with that and find local partners to help scale these things up. So I'd encourage people to think about that as well. But David, I think you had some thoughts on this as well.
I think the main thought I would have, I mean, Liz, firstly, if you've got something that is you think ready to be sort of distributed and taken up more widely, do get in touch and do look out for the next open call for innovations that I mentioned during my opening remarks earlier, because you know we would be very pleased to have a look at it. If I have an impression based on the horizon scanning that Gillian described earlier, is I think there's been probably too little investment in early diagnostic tests generally. If you look at the investment that's gone into cancer research, certainly in the UK and internationally, most of it has gone into the basic biology of cancer, and which of course informs diagnostic tests and first-line treatments. And I think I think there's been historic underinvestment in early diagnosis, and early diagnosis from our perspective is the big game in town now. And so if there are companies watching, thinking about where to put their dollar or their pound next, I would say early diagnosis is where is where it should go. I think that the investment model is harder, and I recognise that might be why there has been historically less investment in that space, but it's really what we're looking for now.
Okay, great. I think we're running short on time. We've got one more question here from the audience.
We need the microphone. Sorry for the broadcast.
Sorry, just very quickly, just building on what you were just saying a moment ago, with regards to the diagnostic from benign to malignant, is there a standardized threshold that you use, or is there any variation amongst the ASEAN countries compared to what we see in the UK, or perhaps what the WHO dictate?
Defer to others on that.
We clear on the question?
Was that you mean a diagnostic threshold between what's a benign condition and what's a malignant condition?
That's right, yes.
So that will vary very much by what disease you're looking at. So that's part of the validation and evaluation you do when you've got a device, is to do that assessment between what is a pre-malignant condition, what is a completely benign condition, and what is a malignant condition. And your thresholds, your sensitivity and specificity are set by your trial design. And so that's part of the things with medical devices, although the kind of investment cycle is a bit shorter than it is with biotech, it's still a significant investment cycle, and there's still a significant amount of time. I think coming back to David's point, a lot of investors don't invest as much in medtech because the returns may not be as great as they are in biotech, but you still got to do that discipline. And the other thing I'd just say is what we've done at King's College is we have created an evaluation center, so particularly around AI. So what we're looking at is if somebody's got a product in AI, and it comes back to the point about black box, which is really relevant. We don't know what's in the algorithms. And the thing that's different about AI is that what might be in your black box today may not be in your black box in 2 years' time, because if it's a machine learning, the algorithm will change with time. And so in order to try and reduce the risk, which is a significant risk to patients, we've created and developed an AI evaluation unit, which looks at how these tools integrate both in terms of systems, but also clinical integration, education, training of staff, because that's really important that they understand what AI technology is. And there's a huge number of myths out there about what AI can and cannot do. And you only seen what happened over the weekend with the ex-member of Google. So there's a lot of concern about it, but if it's done properly and validated by experts in the field, then you're reducing your risk. You can't guarantee you're no risk, but you need to have some kind of
accreditation process around AI technology, and there really isn't anything out there at the moment. The BSI have just come up with some standards, which we at Guy's and St Thomas's helped write those standards, but they've only just come out. So that will give some guidance for what's expected from AI technology.
Thanks, Majid. And Louise, I think you had...
Just a very, very quick point, and just to really re-emphasise Majid's points. So work that we've been doing with our cancer alliances across the east of England just very recently around the teledermatology pathway, for that very reason, the algorithms and that sort of black box, but also to enable that speed of appropriate diagnosis and referral and that rule out kind of technology as well. So this has been a big part of an evaluation approach that we've just taken with the cancer alliances literally in the last couple of weeks. So we'll be very happy to share with you how the East of England Cancer Alliances are taking that forward.
Thanks. Dr. Cole, were you wanting to come in again?
No, not on this topic. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I thought I said. Well, look, I think we're running up against time. So thank you very much for those excellent questions. As I said, clearly a lot of collaboration going on, but also a lot of appetite for more. And so hopefully people have made some good contacts during this session, and they can also follow up with Chris and colleagues at DBT if they want to take those further. And so I will thank you very much again to all our panelists and those who contributed in their case studies and their keynote speeches. And I'll hand back now to Chris to wind up the session.
Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks to you for moderating that session so well. Thank you very much. And again, thanks to the speakers, but thank you to all of you for participating online and in the room here in the Royal Society of Medicine. Really appreciate you coming. And just a reminder that the NHS is keen, some of the leading hospitals are keen to work with colleagues across ASEAN on innovation, on how we can share knowledge and experience together. Very keen to pick up any interest from organizations across ASEAN to do that. We would welcome you to get in touch with us. We've got a new NHS Innovation website for the Department of Business Trade from Healthcare UK. So look for that and or contact us direct. And just to say, please do stay on. We're not kicked out of here for those in the room. You're welcome to have some tea and coffee and cake or whatever and further discussion. We don't have to leave till after 12. And thank you very much again, particularly those people joining online. And I'm just going to hand over to Ian for his final closing remarks. And the panel may wish to step down at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Well, for me, that has been a fascinating 2-hour discussion. And it was remarkable, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of running the UK-ASEAN Business Council, just how much synergy there is between our organisation and everything that's going on with Healthcare UK in this particular sector. We're an organisation, we're an enabling organisation. We don't really own anything, but we make things happen. We bring people together, we facilitate. And I think that's everything Healthcare UK does, and all the wonderful organisations and representative bodies that have taken part this morning. It really is a mirror image. So for us, it's just the beginning. We look forward to partnering with Chris and his colleagues at Healthcare UK going forward. But for us, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to UK-ABC members at AstraZeneca and Prudential, and particularly Matt for moderating, for Alan Lai for doing his usual excellent emceeing from afar. But for most of all, thank you very much for coming, and we all look forward to engaging with you over a slice of cake and a cup of tea or coffee outside. But thanks again, Chris. Cheers.
Thank you.